This is part 3 of my past life in Mintaka. So, well, what I was speaking about last time is I was in the astral plane with the old man, and he had all 6 of his chairs. And when I was with him, I noticed when I sat on the chairs how bouncy they were. So we played this game where I would run and then sit really hard on one of the chairs, and it would cause me to bounce. And we just did that a few times for a bit. It's hard to explain. When you're in spirit, you're very childlike. And you have that childlike essence about you over there. So, like, even though I was, like, I believe to be, like, 13 years old when I died in that life, in the astral plane, some aspect of me was no different from how I was when I was 5. So after I met him and whatever I did, I don't remember, like, how I moved over to the next part. But all I know is I think it was from that life. I mean, it could have been a memory from when I died from another life, but I think this happened in this one. I then went to meet, which possibly is my soul family, but I'm not sure. So I was somewhere in the astral where it was quite dark, and up in the sky there was like these galaxies that I could see in like a dark night sky, but everything around me was just dark. It was almost like a dark kind of void. But I noticed the ground on my feet would light up as I walked, kind of like in Avatar when the ground would be like luminescent every time they walk on a certain part of the ground. And it led to like a path where I saw like these bright glowing willow trees of like all different colours. And these willow trees look pretty much like how the ancestral trees looked in the movie Avatar, with like the leaves and stuff. So it doesn't look like leaves, they look more like tentacles. And I've had this memories. This is the only memory I've had from a previous life from a really young age, even before I got these memories. So I didn't get these ideas from Avatar because I've had this way before the movie even came out. And around these glowing willow trees was these beings. One was blue, one was yellow, one was a pinkish reddish colour, and then I think there's one that was orange. The rest were male, but the one that was female, she used that pinkish reddish colour, and they were sitting on these stumps. And they somehow like connected to these willow trees, and she told me to sit down with them, and we spoke for a bit about something, and then I'm not sure if I was talking about the life that I just lived, and she talked about, you know, things that had to happen and why it happened, but we were able, she said something and we all laughed about it, but I don't remember what the conversation was about. Then after I'd finished speaking with them, I then was having a memory of like walking down a slope that led onto like a beach, and I had completely forgotten about like this memory, because before I didn't think we had life reviews, but I was wrong, and I got this later on that I did have a life review, and it was on this beach, and there was like a theatre like very small screen. The screen, I would say, is the same size as like a white van, not like big as in like a cinema screen. And it had like a red curtain that like pulled apart, and my guide was there, and I've known him from other lifetimes. I think he wore all white, and he had black hair. I don't have really clear visual memory, but I think he was a Palladian. He told me to sit down with him, and like I watched part of my life with him. But at one point I got fed up and wanted to leave, and he wouldn't let me until I'd finished. And there were some moments where he held my hand, and then he said I'm free to go now, and I was so excited to go because I just didn't find the life review process like very interesting, and I was excited to go off and do more. And then eventually I caught up to this bit where my dad from that life was, and I was so happy to meet him again, because ever since I'd moved over, transitioned to the astral plane, I hadn't seen him since. I don't know where my aunt was. I never saw her, so I believe that she crossed over already. But he was there, and we exchanged like that weird kind of hug we do where we hold each other's arms and then leaned in. We talked for a bit, and I just remember like feeling pure joy. So when I was, you know, dying, I felt so much grief and so much misery, but the moment I was on the other side, there was so much joy and happiness in this dimension that I had forgotten what horrible feelings felt like. And I just remembered like I was already felt very joyful being on the other side, but when I saw him, I felt even better than I did before. And it kind of felt very sad and very like bittersweet, because it's like I got to see him again, but not for very long. And he said that he had to go. And we were like on a grassy area, kind of like platform. And I said goodbye to him, and I felt sad, but I was also happy because I knew he was crossing over into the white void and I'd be joining him soon. But he told me I couldn't until I'd broken the soul contract that I'd signed. So he told me that I need to go to the source and like fix this. And this grassy platform suddenly was like floating down. It's like, I don't know how to explain, we were like really small now in size comparison to like how we were before. And this grass platform, it floated down back into the Mintaka, like in the living dimension. And as I said goodbye to him and he ran off into the white void, I then jumped off this grass platform, floated down, and I was back where my body was, where I had just died. And I saw like the reptilians like over my body, and they were getting into an argument. And the weird thing was, when I was dying, I couldn't understand what they were saying. It just sounded like grunting. But like, when I was in spirit, all of a sudden I heard them speaking in my language and I could understand them. And they were like arguing about getting like the tool that they needed out of a box. So these reptilians had like a soul extractor gun thing with like a needle on the end of the gun that they would like extract people's souls out of their body, and they were trying to find the tool that they needed to start my heart again so they could bring me back. And this male reptilian was just arguing with the female one, and she pulled out many toolboxes and then pulled out a metal tool red box, and she said, "What about this one?" And she seemed like she was getting some kind of enjoyment out of winding him up for some reason. And in spirit, I thought this was quite amusing and quite entertaining to watch. Then I realised what I needed to do, and then I noticed that all of a sudden the reptilians noticed that I was watching them. And this is another thing about extraterrestrials, they can see spirits. We can't do that here, but extraterrestrials can see most spirits depending on like the density and like the vibration of that soul. And they could see mine, and I noticed they had just seen me, and they were like, "Hey, get back here." And I know as I was about to go to the source, so I thought to the source, and then that's when they noticed me and said, "Hey, get back here." And at the speed of thought, I was already gone, and I felt a sense of relief that I'd gone away from them in time. I don't have visual memory that's clear on this. It's more like an impression of what I think that I saw. So I was somewhere much more higher than like the cosmic web, and it's like our universe is but like a giant massive bubble with like a membrane around it. Then inside there are like multi-universes, which are just other bubbles within it, and the dimensions are like in layers. Then there was tongues of like wormholes, and there was like a white white see-through kind of like tunnel that I saw consciousness like going into, which I'll explain a bit further in a minute. So when I was there, I felt like below there was like a low vibration energy that was dark and evil, but above me was this clear bright light that looked like a sun, and that clear bright light was like a lighter frequency energy, which we would call God or the divine, but there we called it the source. And God's kind of like, he's not a literal man in the sky. I'm not saying in the astral plane he couldn't take on a human form, but in his true form he is just pure light, and pieces of his consciousness exists in different dimensions, and this was like the main place where it existed, and it was above like all these other dimensions, because the higher the frequency, the higher the dimension. And it was just like a giant sun, and it reminded me of like the sea, how it moved. And there was like wormholes that was like reaching up into it that also had giant galaxies and things in it. And I remember going one direction and it speaking to me, saying, "Not this way, over there's darker energy, it's not safe." So as I was just trying to like explore, so I flew one direction until I reached the end of the membrane. So as I was flying across, it's hard to explain, it got to a point where there was nothing but kind of like darkness. But I saw like this brown kind of swirly wall of fog that like was in a weird kind of shape that I got near, and I flew past until I reached the end. And then I could still speak to like the source, because I don't know why at that moment in time I didn't think to ask the source about the soul contract. I was so curious about what I was looking at that I completely forgot what I needed to do. And I just said to the source, is it alright if I exit out of here? And it said, yeah, but just please come back, don't go too far, kind of thing. So I flew out, and then I was just in a dark void, and there's just darkness, nothing. The void is like where the universe hasn't been created. It was like how the universe was before anything existed. And I was flying along, and then I noticed that there was like something that looked like lightning, like moving around, and there's like these mist clouds that were like to my right side that were kind of moving rapidly, and I was interested in that, so I flew closer to it and I moved up, and then that's where I saw a light blue kind of sky, and then I could see underneath me was the dark void, and then these mist clouds that reached out so far, and I could see this is where consciousness itself was being created. And consciousness looks kind of like tree branches, and I've spoken to someone who like confirmed this to me, because she had an out-body experience and the universe said to her, this is what consciousness looks like. So she told me this because she saw my drawing of consciousness, and she's like, that's exactly what she saw. So these mist clouds were creating consciousness itself, and it was going into the universe, and it was huge, because when I was in spirit, your energy can expand to like any size, so I was at a humongous level because I was connected to the whole of the energy field, so the universe didn't look that big. Why here we're so small that we would never be able to reach the end of the universe, so it just seems like it goes on forever. So I consciousness as well, it pulsed kind of like electricity, kind of like synapses like in the brain, and it was going into like the universe. I saw it go past me, and I went a certain amount of way to look across these clouds, but I didn't go right to the very end. And then I could see the other side of me was where there was an opposite type of consciousness, which was like a darker form of it, which was a lower energy that was being created, which was entering the universe on the other end of the side. So in this light blue kind of sky, I did see there were things that kind of looked like stars. But also in these mist clouds, I think I saw somewhere that there were other universes that were like ours, but I'm not 100% sure on that. As I said, I didn't get very clear visual memory. A lot of this is like impression memory, but the mist cloud part and the blue sky, that was really clear. So I was fed up and I flew back. Like what I'd looked at, like I've seen enough, so I just flew back into like the universe, and then went to the source to speak to it. But I got distracted when I saw like consciousness that was going into the universe now enter into these white see-through tunnels. So when I was there, a part of me decided to float into one of these white see-through tunnels, and then float up because I could see behind me that there was like a piece of consciousness that was flying towards me. But it was quite loud. Like I said, like it was loud. How I explain it is like a loud humming noise. So when I actually floated away from it, it was kind of relief because it was just really noisy. And I personally believe when people have said that they've astral projected and I've heard a loud humming noise, that might be what they are able to hear on the other side. That sound is coming from that. So what was happening is this consciousness was going into these white see-through tunnels, and it was rapidly going somewhere, and then it was transformed into light and was shot out into like the universe. So kind of like, it reminded me of a sheen that was kind of creating like a hologram, and this light was going into it, but I'm not exactly sure, I don't understand it. But once I had faffed around doing that, I then decided, I'm going to speak to the source now. So I remember speaking to the source about cutting the soul contract, and I remember seeing it get like, so I saw an electrical string that was like attached to me, and I got the impression that this string was now attached to like the fetus of the body that I would be going to, and the source all of a sudden got like these electrical scissors and was trying to cut it, but it didn't get a chance to cut it in time, because all of a sudden I saw like another girl like next to me, and she had come out of nowhere, and the impression I got was she's from another planet, because I don't recognise who this person is. I'm not sure if this was like my higher self or another person in spirit with you that was just there coincidentally at the same time, who'd come there to speak to the source. But she was with me at the same time when this happened. There was this kind of, like, it looked like a digital kind of orange coloured globe kind of net thing that went around me and her, along with like this high-pitched kind of whine, and then it kind of made this donk kind of sound, and it started closing in. And I remember her saying, "Oh, what's going on?" So I grabbed this girl's hand and said, "Follow me," as we flew down into like this dark tunnel, which felt like a plug that had sucked us through something. And then the next thing is I saw my consciousness had landed into like this gun of the reptilian, and it was like small enough now that it could fit into this. So as I said, because our energy can expand to like any kind of size, and I don't know why my consciousness couldn't escape out of this glass jar, but it just couldn't, because this gun, it has a glass jar attached to it onto this gun, and this gun then has a needle which they usually would stick into the heart or into the neck, where they would distract the soul. Usually, like, when you come back to your body, you either can enter through the head or through the navel, and I came through the head, I think. I don't know what happened to the girl, but she wasn't in the glass jar with me, and I don't know where she went. That's why I kind of wonder if she was my higher self, because if she was, she could have blended her energy in with mine, but I don't think that's the case. So what happened to her, I don't know, but all I know is I found myself in this gun and was banging on the glass for them to let me out. I was so distraught. I knew that wherever they were taking me, I was going to have no hope of escape, and I got the impression that I would never see this dimension again. I'd never see home again. I'd probably never see the spirit world again, and the idea was just so distressing. And I was like banging and like begging this reptilian to let me out, and because I wouldn't shut up when he told me to shut up many times, like, he electrocuted me, and it was like really painful. And the next thing is I blanked unconscious. Then I was somewhere like on his ship, and like the technology always had like an outdated feel to it, so I don't know if this was like what their technology would be like now, but I always got the impression it always had like an old looking feel to it, like if it was like their version of like the 80s when it comes to technology, except more advanced than 80s technology. I don't know how to like explain that bit, but when I was on like their ship, they had me like on a wooden kind of rack type shelf, and I was trying to ask them like questions about where they were taking me, but they weren't really giving me any answers. And then I started asking them questions, because the front of their ship, how they controlled it was like with these different switches, and I was asking questions about that, and like the female reptilian was kind of happy to speak to me, but like the male one hated that, and he's like, "This is why women are never like in charge of anything." And it was quite the impression I got in general, like from that channeled information, was in reptilian society, like they're extremely sexist, and that's just like the norm as a part of their culture. So she placed me underneath this like wooden rack kind of shelf, and I could see, when I moved my mind's eye around, I could see like behind me that there was like a dip that went down, and then I could see they had lots of storage and stuff stored into that bit. But they didn't, and then I tried to move my mind's eye to look around even further in the ship. They knew that I was doing that and didn't like it. So she hit some kind of, she put me in something that kind of looked like a microwave, but it wasn't, with like a red light, and that caused me to pass out. Then when they had dropped me off and where they were taking me, it was just him. I don't know where the female reptilian went, but she was gone, and he was walking with me in this glass jar that he had now taken off the gun, and like he was about to take me to like the ship where they were like placing us, and he was speaking to these other male reptilians, saying, "Oh, this one, she like taking the mick out of the fact that I was in distress when I was being kidnapped." And they all started laughing and like banging on the glass, going, "Oh, let me out," and just taking the piss. And it was like really, really upsetting. I wasn't used to it because in like Mintaka society we were so nice to each other. Here, like on Earth, it's like the norm to treat each other like that, so like it would irritate us, but it wouldn't hurt us anywhere near the level as it did for me then, because I wasn't used to it. And I could like understand why they'd find pleasure in my pain, but I just reminded myself that I'd be going to like a new body soon and I would lose all those painful memories and I would forget that feeling, completely oblivious to the sort of thing I'd be getting when I come to Earth and how horrible that would be, and that what I experienced then was going to be nothing in comparison to the crap and horrible Earth stuff that I was going to have to go through. But anyway, as I was being, this glass jar that I was in was placed on a conveyor belt with other glass jars. I could see there was a line of other Mintakans. There was two at the back, and on each side of the line there was a reptilian making sure that no one could escape. And then there was two at the front, and there also were these two Palladians that were like, you know, the stereotypical blonde Nordics that people talk about. I also saw that there was like another person who I've actually managed to like contact them in this life, and we were able to confirm memories that showed that I knew her, but she was a he in that life, and she had tried to fight them off with her magic because she had like some kind of magic staff, and the reptilians managed to break that and like push it into the line with like the others. I knew her like from that life when she was a he from like childhood, and like she in that life was like the guardian of Aya, and like she had like the responsibility of like looking after like the nature and like the wildlife. So I'm just like gonna call her a he because she was a he in that life, just to make things, even though it's kind of confusing, but he was like the guardian of Aya and looked after like the nature and the plants and everything that was so connected to everything there. And there was like a time when I was a kid and I went there and we were on this hill and we were like playing with each other, and he had run off and I had followed, and I was kind of annoyed that he had run off somewhere into like this jungle kind of area, and then they started talking to me about nature and the plants and that, and I kind of forgot that I was like irritated with them for running off. But at one point I did end up walking back up like the hill. The guardian who I was with, who I got the impression was the queen, was speaking with the boy's father, and they were chatting for a bit, and then they had got off somewhere. I had gone up to this part on like top of this hill where there was like where I decided to sit down for a bit, and it was kind of like it was made completely of stone, and it kind of curved round like in a crescent moon kind of shape, and it was a type of like bench, and it also had like a back bit where you could rest your back on, like, but it wasn't very big, and it had a face on it. It's weird, like it could come, the spirit of like someone who had died there kind of controlled this bench and was able to make it talk. As I sat there, I turned to the side. I was sitting like sideways on the bench, like looking as I was speaking to like the spirit of the person that was controlling this bench, and I was asking like why are they controlling like this bench, like why have they attached their consciousness to this particular thing. And he was explaining how he was like 120 years old and how he loved Aya and he didn't want to leave this place, and he knew that like if he had left this place he probably wouldn't be incarnating back here, so he decided that he would find a way to keep himself here. So he didn't ever like cross over and has kind of kept himself what you would call earthbound, but it'd be called spirit bound because obviously this wasn't Earth. Behind this bench was other great gravestones and things, so that's kind of like where I remember like I knew this person from childhood. But when we had met up, when I saw this person in the line, I didn't recognise them because we hadn't seen each other from childhood. So they were like an adult now, and this person in that life, I remember seeing like they were really skinny, really tall, and have really long arms. Also was a particular Mintakan in the back that was really terrified and was having more of like a panic attack compared to the rest. And like there was someone like at the end of the line, one of the reptilians would hold the shoulders of like one of the Mintakans and they wouldn't be able to move, and then they would jet them in the neck and distract the soul and then place it into one of the glass jars. I got the impression that they were shoving their bodies on like another conveyor belt and then burning or doing something with their bodies inside the ship, but I didn't quite remember like what I saw because this bit does not have any kind of clear visual memories. The only bit I remember like very clearly was the bit when I was like going up the conveyor belt like on the ship in these glass jars, and I could see the other souls and they kind of just looked like a type of energy that was like a colour, like a mist, but they were like different colours, like a blobby kind of mist. But I could see them, like they didn't have any kind of humanoid shape or anything like that, and they were completely unconscious, so I felt alone because I was the only conscious one in this glass jar as I was being taken up onto the ship. But like before I was being taken up onto the ship, when I saw like these female Pleiadians that were there, I got the impression the female Pleiadian, she didn't like, for some reason I was being put on the ship for some reason. We were standing to the left side, so I recognised these Pleiadians, and these Pleiadians weren't nice ones, they had betrayed us. So everyone's got this false conception that all Pleiadians are good, but Pleiadians can be just like people, they can have their own agenda. And these Pleiadians were the type that see themselves as the heroes but don't see the flaws and like in what they do. They were basically the villains that see themselves as the heroes. And like I remember her the most more than him because way like before the war I was somewhere on a beach and there was like other Mintakans that were just chilling out in like the seawater. This female Pleiadian, a few times in this particular area, she would be hovering, she'd fly over, she'd be hovering in the sky, and she created like this hologram of Earth, and she would say, does anyone want to volunteer to come here? Earth is in danger, you need to help us. And then this man, he agreed that he would go, but the rest would be like, keep quiet, don't acknowledge her, I know you don't want to go there. But like, these Pleiadians had teamed up to find a way to take us down, I believe, so they could get us to come to Earth, and I don't know the reason why they would do that. One time when I was on this particular beach, the male and female Pleiadian had come with like, you know those ship crates, those metal ship crates that contain things? Well, this had the rectangle kind of slit so you could see inside it, and they had placed it down on our beach, and inside was like this black box with like chains around it, and there was like an evil spirit inside that was making a ton of noise, and they had said, you know, can you keep an eye on this for us? We've got an issue with our ship, we need to go back and sort it out, we'll come back for it later. So we agreed, but this creature was just making such an horrible noise, this like evil spirit, that, and it was distressing like the others on the beach, especially as they could feel the energy coming from this thing. So this guy, he agreed that he would try and move it, so he pulled it out of the crate and tried to push it, but he accidentally did something and the chains came loose, and this creature inside just flew out, and it caused so much chaos, which also helped weaken like the barrier that was supposed to be protecting us from like the evil kind of stuff. Now I don't know how they were even able to bring this thing inside on our planet, on Mintaka, in the first place, considering how evil it was, but I guess the Pleiadians knew a way to do that. But it getting loose caused chaos, and that was one of the other reasons why our star died. But again, I don't have like a memory that definitively says how Mintaka perished, because I believe there was lots of things that happened, but that was like one of the main things that I believe that caused a lot of damage. And the fact that they would stoop that low, that they would, just because not many were volunteering, they would find a way to team up with the reptilians and, you know, agree to murder us all, take our souls where they wanted it to go for their own agenda, was just incredibly selfish. As I was going up the conveyor belt anyway when I was on that ship, I did start kind of screaming and panicking for a bit, and then it went up a very steep kind of narrow kind of rectangle chute up the ship and into like these boxes that contained us. Then all of a sudden, like, this kind of mist like was being pumped out of these, like, the top of the ceiling that was like landing on us. But this golden light, which I believe was like from source, came out of nowhere and like protected me from it, whatever that was, and it pushed it out through the air vent, and I followed it with my mind's eye, and saw it like land in like the Palladian's face, and they were choking on it, and the female Palladian was like, "I thought you shut off the air vents," and he said, "I thought I did." Anyway, at some point this ship took off, but anyway, like, on the journey there was like one point where all of us Mintakas, like, we found a way to move our mind's eye. It's kind of like a second form of astral projection, but like for spirits. So if like a spirit is stuck somewhere, so it's kind of like what I did when I was alive, and I said I could only astral project a certain way. I think when I said that was really more like a sort of mind's eye thing than an actual astral projection. But like in spirit we could all do it now, then that's where the others could like do what I was doing. But we wiggled our way out of these boxes. I must have done that before I looked out of the ship to see where we were taking off, otherwise I wouldn't have probably been able to have seen that. But when we came out, I remember at some point, I think I looked further down the ship and I could see like the same thing that this person who I said had spoken to, where we had connection from previous life, from childhood. So she confirmed like this memory of what I saw, because she saw the same thing. There was like a rectangled kind of ship that had come through one of the doors that contained like other things and like crates with like other souls that were like in jars that were being placed inside the ship, and then there was like a hologram of Earth that they were like looking at. And I don't remember like the journey of like how we got there, but I do remember saying like to the others, you know, if we don't see each other again, I love you, and we were all saying that to each other. And what hurt was because we were out of these boxes for our mind's eye, not like literally out of the boxes. We couldn't see each other, we could only feel each other's presence, so we couldn't even interact with each other directly, not even give each other a last hug. There was another guy who wouldn't respond to us, he seemed really down that he had been taken, and he didn't want to speak to any of us. And I don't know what happened to like the rest. I don't remember really like anything beyond that point of how I came to Earth and how my soul ended up in this body, but all I know is like I came here through forced incarnation. I have a theory why the reptilians did this, because human society doesn't have anything to do with aliens. Like, we don't have contact, so we can't mess around with other alien societies and like help them against, you know, bad things that the Palladians do. I've heard like with Mintaka, our weaknesses, we were always helping other alien races, which was like a nuisance to the reptilians, and that's why they wanted to attack us. And just like the Lyrans, we were naive and we didn't see it coming in time until it was too late. So I think by containing me on Earth, I couldn't be a nuisance, and I believe the soul contract they created was either to keep me coming back in the physical so I could never have any chance of possibly interfering with them, or in the worst case scenario, something goes wrong with my energy when it dies and I might not get an afterlife. Not get an afterlife because that might be the rules of this dimension, that maybe some souls perish, and that's why some people have NDs, have an experience, and some don't. Hopefully that's not the case. Hopefully people who don't have an experience, it was because they weren't meant to, and that could be like a soul contract thing. I think the main thing may have just to keep my energy in the physical so I wouldn't be able to leave. Hopefully that soul contract is broken now because of like my Reiki healer and that, and how I'd asked, and hopefully it stays that way. So when I die, I should have free will this time around. At least I hope so, and I do hope that I do get to go back to the spirit world when I die of old age, because I don't want to never see that place again because of a mistake I made in that life by, you know, not dying in the shell house at the time where my body would have been safe and they wouldn't have been able to walk me back, and also me not getting the soul contract cut in time because I was too curious looking at everything. I've also heard theories how loose energy theory, how the reptilians like, you know, dark, like the negative emotions and feelings we experience sometimes end up in like in the grid. And before, like, I talked about how I remembered, like, the ship, where there was, like, this net thing that the ship went through that was in our solar system, and then there was one around the Earth that they opened up and it went through, which I talked about when I was on Chad's channel. I didn't realise that was a grid. I knew nothing about the grid at the time. And the fact that I've seen so many people confirm that there's something called a grid and, like, what it is, and that they've seen it, and I've also spoken to someone who has done grid work, like, confirms what I saw. So there is a theory that reptilians feed off loosh, so that could be another reason why. But I feel like them containing me somewhere I couldn't bother with them was, like, the main reason. I'll never know to this day, like, the real reason why it happened. I know there's some people that would deny that forced incarnations can happen. I don't believe they're common, but they can sometimes happen, and there's not a victim mentality. I don't really view myself, like, as a victim, because it's just, like, a part of life. Like, what happened sucked, but then a part of me thinks that, you know, I was meant to come to the physical because I was, like, meant to learn about duality and polarities and things like that, which I couldn't learn there because where I was before, everything was too nice and too perfect, which made me naive. So I guess by coming to Earth, I was able to learn, you know, about how not to be naive and, you know, you can't trust everyone and that kind of thing. As long as when in spirit I get a say where I go next and I get my free will again, then, you know, what happened to me, it, you know, happened. It's not a massive deal, it's just a part of life. Unlike Harry McAlsty, is it Harry McAlsty or whatever his name is? I don't believe, like, we're trapped here, or, like, in most cases that we're forced to come here. I just believe there's some cases where there's not nice beings in the astral plane, either they're extraterrestrials or, you know, archons, which is still another type of reptilian, that try maybe to keep us here, but again, I don't know that for certain. I just know that sometimes it can happen based on my own experience. And we know how a lot of us have thought, you know, I wouldn't have come here by choice. There's a high chance that you might have not have, because I remember thinking that, knowing that I wouldn't have come here, I don't think, by choice. And I was right based on, like, the memories that I got, and it explained a lot. That's basically the memories that I have of that life.